There's been a reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. It's undermining confidence in the people of Florida.
Why do you think Trump is spreading misinformation?
I don't know. I simply don't know. You can speculate, but I just find it, I know I've used the phrase more than I've used it ever in my whole career, un-American. It's un-American. It's not who the hell we are. What are they talking about?
Now, this is so predictable. So Floridians are focused on survival, not politics. But Democrats and their media lackeys were busy with another type of disaster relief today, a rescue operation for Kamala's campaign. As they have so many times before, they're trying to deflect and even silence their political opponents. And Kamala seems like she's desperately trying to turn the page from her underwhelming media tour, so she jumped on the disinfo bandwagon.
Are we concerned about any misinformation or disinformation regarding evacuations that we need to clear up at this point?
There's been a lot of misinformation out there, Madam Vice President, that's for sure.
But what is all of this misinformation they're so worried about?
Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. It's simply not true.
Oh, wait. Where did Biden find people saying that property is being confiscated? Well, after some digging, we found the White House sourced a single Twitter account with fewer than 5,000 followers for that bit of misinformation. So if anyone is amplifying disinformation from fringe sources, it's the Democrats themselves and Biden. Yet with battleground poll numbers trending toward Trump, the pro-Harris media, they're panicked, they're frustrated, which means a return to the echo chamber.
There is a significant amount of misinformation being spread.
They are keenly aware of the misinformation that is currently circulating on all corners of the internet.
It's something that is obviously so concerning to the administration, and we're really seeing the effects of it.
And again, what are they basing this on?
One of the things that has struck me about Hurricane Milton, the way that I've heard people discussing this storm and the sort of distrust about what this storm actually is. I spoke to an elderly woman who told me that she believed that this hurricane was geoengineered.
Okay, so now one random woman that he ran into makes a CNN disinformation narrative? Now, the truth is, FEMA is also doing its own damage control because it hurt its own credibility. Now, last night on The Angle, we exposed the agency-wide prioritization of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Fox, of course, has already documented their slow-footed response to Hurricane Helene.
We just feel like we're being forgotten. We haven't received any response from FEMA.
We're not getting the amount of support that we need.
We haven't seen FEMA. We haven't seen Red Cross. We haven't seen Hearts with Hands. We've seen no agencies come through here.
There's so much more that could be done, and giving us $750 if you can even apply for it is ridiculous. $750 isn't going to do anything even if you do get approved.
But FEMA wants you to feel sorry for them.
The environment's been very tough the last couple of weeks with all of the misinformation that we've been seeing. It's difficult to operate when we don't have trust and trust in those institutions that are built and there to protect people. And so we need to continue to push forward on getting that accurate information out there. That's what we've been doing.
Oh, it's hard for them? Okay. Well, the truth is, the Biden-Harris administration did not get its act together until public outrage grew and Americans realized how FEMA was actually spending our money. And yeah, it's our money. And also when we discovered that it was obvious that the feds hadn't pre-deployed enough resources despite knowing how bad the hurricane was actually going to be. But now Harris and Biden are trying to spin their failures as misinformation. But again, other than a few fringe theories out there, there are certain facts that are beyond dispute. First, FEMA did neglect residents in areas ravaged by Hurricane Helene, as exposed by the victims themselves. And it wasn't until they started speaking out and Elon Musk publicly criticized the trouble he was having getting his Starlink terminals dropped into affected areas, that things finally started improving. Second, DHS Secretary Mayorkas literally told us they were running out of money for FEMA hurricane assistance.
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds, FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
Third, FEMA allocated over $640 million this year alone to sheltering migrants. So combine this with other money that DHS, which oversees FEMA, has already spent on resettling migrants since 2021, and we're talking billions. We don't even know how much, but billions and billions of dollars since Biden and Harris took office. And this money, of course, should be spent and allocated to shoring up disaster management for Americans, not on illegal aliens. Fourth, in addition to the billions for the care of migrants, Kamala just boasted about $157 million that her administration greenlit to go to Lebanon. So instead of addressing the substantive criticisms, the Harris camp and their immediate protectorate is sprinkling their hurricane warnings with just totally irrelevant, petty, and nonsensical smears.
It is unconscionable, frankly, that anyone who would consider themselves a leader would mislead desperate people. The last thing that they deserve is to have a so-called leader make them more afraid than they already are. The gamesmanship has to stop. At some point, the politics have to end, especially in a moment of crisis.
You know what was unconscionable? That you were in Vegas at a campaign event when this hurricane was ripping through North Carolina. Yeah, you're the vice president still, remember? Look, what we know from our experience with COVID is that powerful forces collaborated with government institutions to censor their critics. And now, all these years later, we see that many of the physicians who were censored or punished during COVID were, in fact, telling the truth. The same censorship happened surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop in the fall of 2020, right before the vote. And now, 27 days until this year's election, and they're engaged in the same type of censorship tactic. But we won't let them get away with it.
As Hurricane Milton brings biblical damage to Florida, Biden came out today and defended his administration's slow response to Hurricane Helene, calling any criticism of it disinformation and pointing fingers at Trump.
There's been reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That is simply not true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true.
Biden's fighting Trump harder than the hurricane. If he should be angry at anybody, he should be angry at his team. They didn't pre-position assets in North Carolina to help in the foothills. Just like Afghanistan and the border, the hurricane's now Trump's fault. Americans have lost power, their homes, some of them even their husbands. They're not worried about what politicians say on TV. They are worried because they haven't seen FEMA all week. Criticizing your government isn't misinformation. It's a God-given right of every American. Instead of battling to save lives, the Biden-Harris administration is treating natural disasters like a PR battle that need to be won with words instead of fast action.
There have always been issues in disasters. Maui, certainly this happened where there's misinformation or there's scams, but we've never seen anything like we have at this level.
The administration will also continue to work out and call out misinformation and conspiracy theories around the storm and federal and state responses. This is wrong, dangerous, and it must stop immediately.
Are we concerned about any misinformation or disinformation regarding evacuations that we need to clear up at this point?
There's been a lot of misinformation out there, Madam Vice President, that's for sure.
The only misinformation we've heard is that Biden's doing a great job. Oh, and if you just drive your electric car, Cat 5 hurricanes will shrink into Cat 2s. Americans are naturally suspicious of the government after they lied to us about, oh, I don't know, Vietnam, Iraq, COVID, Russia, the president's health. This isn't a cheap fake. North Carolina sees the aftermath, and Biden and Harris were late. So what are they claiming is disinformation? Number one, FEMA is seizing property. Trump never said that. Number two, people wouldn't get more than $750. Trump never said that. Oh, and then the migrant money. That came from them. Mayorkas said FEMA was going to run out of money for hurricane season. And FEMA admitted they wasted $1 billion on migrants. Now, I'm not great at math. If I were, I'd work on Wall Street. But if you spend too much money on one thing and don't have enough money for another thing, that means you messed up. But if someone's making crazy claims on the internet about FEMA, so what? The president of the United States shouldn't be amplifying it at a press conference. No one had ever heard about most of this misinformation until Biden repeated it in front of the nation. All of this silliness is designed to distract the media from covering Biden's failure in North Carolina. He makes the story about Trump, so the story's not about him. And the media just goes along. Even CNN's confronting the administration about not being prepared. Watch this.
After Helene made landfall in the United States on September 26, Joe Biden was at his house in Rehoboth Beach. Vice President Kamala Harris was flying between ritzy California fundraisers, hobnobbing with celebrities. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was in Los Angeles presiding over an award ceremony. How do you respond to those accusations from J.D. Vance?
Kate, we don't listen to or pay attention to such unproductive and, quite frankly, counterproductive words.
So criticizing Democrats counterproductive, but criticizing Republicans is saving lives by combating misinformation. You got that? What's counterproductive is leaving Americans hanging, but bending over backwards to help foreigners who broke into the country. Americans have to wait weeks for $750 when they lost their home. But a migrant crosses the border, gets a free bus ticket, free hotel room, free food, free phone, debit cards, lickety-split. Migrants get to cut the security line at the airport while you wait weeks for FEMA to arrive. It's not right. All we're asking is to put Americans first. We don't hate anyone. We just want fairness and respect, especially since we pay for the government that's supposed to help us when we can't help ourselves. We shouldn't be debating politics and arguing about misinformation. We should come together and save lives. But even so-called scientists are going on TV and saying, if you vote for Kamala Harris, hurricanes will shrink.
The other side, as we often call it, has no plans to address climate change, no plans for long-term dealing with these sorts of problems. If you have young voters out there, encourage them to vote. People say, what can I do about climate change? If we were talking about it, associating it with big storms like this, that would be really good. But the main thing is vote.
This is like saying the best thing you could do to protect yourself from the hurricane is get vaccinated. Remember that? Trump was asked about how these hurricanes will impact the election, and he said he wasn't thinking about voting. He was thinking about lives. Donald Trump hosting nearly 300 linemen from Florida Power and Light Company at his Doral Golf Club. And Kamala Harris has been sidelined by Joe Biden and has been left to complain that DeSantis won't take her calls.
I am working with President Biden and FEMA and our state and local partners, and we're getting the job done. She has never been interested in any of the storms we've had in the state of Florida for her entire time as vice president. Now she's out there attacking me because I'm not catering to her whims. All she's trying to do is inject herself to be a part of her political campaign. I don't have time for political games. We've got a job to do. We got people's lives on the line, and that is our sole focus.
Even President Biden's telling Harris to stand down. He says, don't get involved. He and Ron, we're working well together.
Does Governor DeSantis need to take Vice President Harris's calls?
All I can tell you is I'm talking to Governor DeSantis. He's been very gracious. He's thanked me for all we've done. He knows what we're doing, and I think that's important.
It's good to know Biden and DeSantis are working well together because Florida's about to get smashed. It's also good to know FEMA won't be getting in the way there.
Just let me be clear, in Florida, we run the show. FEMA's not running the show. We will utilize them to support some of the things we're doing, but you are not going to see FEMA running amok in Florida. I know that's been out there on the internet. That is not going to happen. I'm the sheriff that's in charge here, and we will make sure to protect you. Don't worry about it.
Now, we're going to take you back to on the ground in Florida all night long as we do monitor Hurricane Milton. But first, after nearly 4 years of skipping hurricane preparedness briefings, missing them, skipping them, not being there, ignoring every major storm in the country, Vice President Kamala Harris is suddenly pretending to care. And almost a full 2 weeks after the disaster caused by Hurricane Helene, let's be very clear here. Harris and Biden's response to Hurricane Helene, to this devastating hurricane, has been the absolute worst in American history. But now we're on the verge of an election, a rare sighting today. Kamala Harris actually attended a hurricane briefing, but it did not exactly go well for Kamala. She stumbled and stammered over her words while trying so hard to sound so well informed, which she's not. At one point, she even tried to talk to a staffer on a hot mic by covering her mouth like this with her hands. Take a look.
To the people of Florida, and in particular the people of the Tampa region, we urge you to take this storm seriously.
For some of these type of traditional places that could flood, we really got to watch those areas and those communities. So it takes quite a while for that water to drain.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Ken, I have a question for you. You mentioned words matter, and I know there's a lot of media following this briefing.
For almost 4 years, she never once called Governor DeSantis. Not one time when there was a hurricane in the state of Florida. Not once. And then she tried to politicize it this week. And, well, meanwhile, Governor DeSantis was on my radio show today. He has over 50,000 people staged to follow in right after this hurricane that's going to work its way across the state tonight. Now, that awkward showing by Kamala, one of many of, her recent public appearance disasters. After barely even talking off script for months, Harris is now suddenly participating in a flurry of interviews with her friends in the state-run media mob. And we have speculated since Monday that her internal polls must be atrocious. And today, we had a little confirmation. Not exactly a conservative. Journalist Mark Halpern. Listen to what he had to say.
What's happening now with Kamala Harris is this is an experiment. Can you win a short campaign with an untested candidate? And what I'm telling you is happening in private polling is she's got a problem now, okay? It's not cheering for Trump. It's not predicting Trump will win. She's got a problem. For you Harris people on here complaining that we're talking about problems in the Harris campaign, you're welcome to put your head in the sand about it. If you want to go watch MSNBC Primetime and hear how great things are going for the Harris campaign, you're welcome to do that. But if you want to understand what's actually happening, we're here to tell you. I just saw some new private polling today that's very robust private polling. She's in a lot of trouble.
Oh, I guess the joy is gone. Panic has completely set in at the Harris campaign. Even Quinnipiac polls out just today show Harris losing both Wisconsin and Michigan. She's down 4 points in Michigan in this poll. She is down 2 points in Wisconsin. She's down 2 points, we see, in Pennsylvania. A new poll out by Insider Advantage. That's Matt Towery, who will join us later in the program. And, by the way, that's the most recent poll. She is massively underperforming both Biden in 2020 and Hillary in 2016. Real Clear Politics shows on this very date, October 9th, 2016, Hillary Clinton was up nearly 5 points, while on this date in 2020, Biden was up 9.7. Today, 2024, it is a 2.0 point race. That's it. Now, of course, if Kamala was a capable leader, and not just a spineless, mediocre politician hiding her true beliefs, hiding from the media, hiding from the American people. And if she actually really cared about people, as she proclaims, she would have been on the ground the last 2 weeks in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and leading recovery efforts. She's been completely missing in action. She's been picking fake fights with Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, in the middle of 2 deadly hurricanes, stumbling her way through a 60 Minutes interview. That turned out to be a disaster. And despite some heavy lifting from the edit department at CBS, still didn't work out well. She's also giggling, as per usual, showing up on a podcast named Call Her Daddy and talking about Raisin Bran with Howard Stern in a suit, sipping tea with the ladies of The View, and cracking a cold beer with Stephen Colbert instead of helping the people of North Carolina and Georgia. Take a look.
Elections, I think, are won on vibes because one of the old saws is they just want somebody they can have a beer with. So would you like to have a beer with me so I can tell people what that's like? Okay. This was... Now, we asked ahead of time because I can't just be giving a drink to the Vice President of the United States without asking. You asked for Miller High Life. You asked for Miller High Life. I'm just curious.
Okay, the last time I had beer was at a baseball game with Doug.
Okay, so cheers. There
cheers.
You go. There you go. Ooh. That tastes like the beautiful city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Champagne and beers.
People in states like Georgia, North Carolina abandoned, and she's giggling and yucking it up and drinking beer with Stephen Colbert. Americans in multiple states have lost everything. The entire state of Florida is getting ravaged right at this hour as we speak in my home state, as I broadcast from the Fox studios in Florida. This is the second major hurricane in this state in 2 weeks. Kamala's drinking beer on the set with Stephen Colbert, yucking it up on the Call Me Daddy podcast. The ladies with The View, a woke Howard Stern, the old Howard Stern, whatever happened to him. And she's also randomly trying out a, fake Jamaican accent on Colbert's show. This is supposed to be funny or something? Take a listen.
It's crude. Have empathy, man.
Yes.
For the suffering of other people. Have no sense of purpose if you purport to be a leader.
I don't know if that was the tape we called for, but empathy, she was talking about Donald Trump in that cut. Empathy, why hasn't she been in North Carolina? The audience is obviously confused. So are we not one of these, if it were not one of these cupcake interviews, they're not going to help her. These are people that already support her with dwindling audiences. Earlier in the day, the vice president telling the ladies of The View that she can't think of a single thing she would have done differently than Joe Biden. Not one. Not the borders, the economy, not the high cost of energy, not defund, dismantle police and ICE, not giving $200 billion to Ukraine and making the Iranians filthy rich. But a few hours later on Colbert, she couldn't come up with a single thing. Take a look.
You are a member of the President's administration. Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of... Yes. But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump. And so when we think about the significance of what this next generation of leadership looks like, were I to be elected president, it is about, frankly, I love the American people, and I believe in our country. I love that it is our character and nature to be an ambitious people.
Okay, more cliche. She wouldn't change a thing. She's no Donald Trump, I agree, because the border would be secure, the economy would rebound, and people around the world would respect us. And what's most pathetic about this ass-kissing media tour is Joe and Kamala and FEMA's horrific response across the Southeast in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Does Kamala really think her government is doing a great job? Does she agree with Joe Biden that the victims in North Carolina, Georgia, and everywhere in between are getting everything they need and everybody's happy? Because that's what Joe said last week. Listen.
What do the states in the storm zone need, Mr. President? Okay.
What are the states in the storm zone? What do they need after what you saw today?
Oh, in the storm zone.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what storm you're talking about. They're getting everything they need, and they're very happy across the board.
Now, we are hearing a much different story on the ground. We've had our own Sarah Carter been reporting from the hardest hit areas in North Carolina and elsewhere all week. Nobody has gotten the help that they deserve. And perhaps if they were in the country illegally, well, then they probably would be treated better, wouldn't they? Free housing, food, health care, education. Oh, let's see. Sex change operations, amnesty, legal driver's licenses, and free college. Anyway, you're not even allowed to mention any of this in any way, shape, manner, or form, or criticize the government for their horrific response, because they get very upset. They think it's not helpful. And you have these far-left media outlets like, Mediaite, MSDNC, Fake News, CNN. They actually want you to believe any criticism of Harris, Biden, FEMA is misinformation. No, it's the truth, because FEMA and the Biden and Harris administration, they got caught flat-footed. They did nothing. They had next to nothing prepositioned, knowing for days that a massive hurricane was about to hit the country. Governors like DeSantis and Kemp and McMaster, they all prepositioned state resources, people, utility trucks, supplies, manpower, all ahead of time. FEMA, Joe, Kamala, missing in action. Joe sat on his ass on the beach. Kamala was hanging out in Hollywood with her rich elitist Hollywood friends. 6 days later, Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas said, yeah, FEMA is apparently in shambles financially, and we probably don't have enough money for hurricane season. And then we discovered on FEMA's own website that the agency distributed more than $1 billion to house and feed Harris and Biden unvetted illegal immigrants, $1 billion over the last 2 years. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.